Hello everyone. I'm Fiona on Genpulse and also on Cohort 3. Kuleen will probably know me very well. And then we also have new friends here, so why don't we start with a round of self-introduction.
Great, I've got the mic, I'll start. Hey guys, I'm Kuleen. I'm part of the Solana team. I do a bunch of things, but one of the things I do is I lead our AI efforts. Yeah, I'm excited to chat.
Hey everybody, I'm Lane, also super excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm a developer first and foremost, so I was actually an Ethereum core developer for a few years. Built a blockchain, a layer 1 blockchain called Space Mesh after that, and right now I'm head of research at the Near Foundation. Near is laser focused on AI and the intersection of AI and blockchain and some governance stuff as well, so that's what I'm up to.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniil Liberman. Me and my brother and our sister, some other brothers, we've been building businesses since 2005 together, mainly in machine learning, computer vision and stuff. We sold some companies to several companies, Snapchat, and recently, for a couple of years, we've been developing what we launched months ago, and this is called AI, and decentralized AI for providing the decentralized future for that.
Hi everyone, my name is Stefan. I'm working here from Trustar AI. Trustar focuses on the on-chain data analyze. We can give them the score and to analyze their activities to see if they are truly valuable to the ecosystem of the projects. Thank you.
Great. So I see today we gather up all these experts with AI. And then, why don't we start with Stefan? The first question would be, what is the biggest limitation of the traditional pay-as-you-go model for decentralized AI? Or how does the concept of like a land and lease model fundamentally improve capital efficiency for the AI agents?
Okay, that's a long story. That's a long question. Okay, for me, I think the pay-as-you-go model is it costs a lot, especially from the upfront. So the medium and the small agency, they can't offer to that kind of much money to prepaid. And even if sometimes they don't fully use the compute power, I think that's the weakness of this model. And from the lead side, you can allow many small enterprise to fully use their capital efficiency, and they can really borrow the compute power when they really need that. It really costs them less. Thank you.
The way we handle this at Conk AI, because we build a layer 1 proof of work blockchain, where all of the mined coins are basically going to the GPU providers, to the compute providers. In this sense, we say that it can be perceived as a subsidy in which the builders of the infrastructure, or the future infrastructure of decentralized AI, are the ones who are getting the most of the benefit of the future cost of the network. And basically, a limited amount of the points represent the future market. And in this sense, the price structure for the developers to get access and the consumers to get access to AI at the current stage basically forms through the prism of, we say, first 60% of the GPU, of the compute capacity of the networks is provided for free to all of the developers who are reaching to the network through the API. And then after the 60% is exceeded, that's when the price starts to kick in. And it's similar to the most recent Ethereum model for the gas price formation. And that's what we say, basic market will define what is physically viable today for the developers to pay as you go, but like don't pay the full cost of the GPU itself right now, because the GPU providers are subsidized with the coin, which embody the future cost of this network. Therefore, that way we basically subsidize the engineers, both engineers and which will use the AI through the API and the networks to be built. And then some might say like, yeah, but in the future they still need to pay the core price, and the investment should be covered by the future cost. So what's the difference? It's like 1+1. But honestly, what we can see with the history of Bitcoin is that Bitcoin can be perceived not only as a digital gold, but also as a framework for financing infrastructure creation. So over the course of 15 years of the existence of Bitcoin, hundreds of billions of dollars in a peer-to-peer manner, like people who didn't know each other, in a permissionless manner, was invested into building data centers, filling these data centers with new chips, designing this new chip, designing ASICs, and then building even electrical powers to power the grid. And today, this is all close to 26 or maybe even over 26 gigawatt of power spent by Bitcoin alone, by the network of the data centers which powers the compute behind Bitcoin. And as much as like for Bitcoin, this compute doesn't matter because it's still 7 transactions a second, and it's still the same one product, scarcity, like it's secured by the consensus of the voting power of the compute. But the compute itself is enormous. The compute itself is thousands of times higher than combined all of the existing top cloud providers like AWS, GCP, Azure, even OpenAI and Meta. Together they are smaller. They provide smaller electrical power with smaller infrastructure in terms of data centers for compute, and even less operations, mathematical operations, than Bitcoin alone. So Bitcoin paved the way for the next cloud to be not centralized by the 3 companies, like 65% or something like this of the cloud compute. Today, it represented by 3 companies, AWS, GCP, Azure. The future of AI can be completely decentralized, and it's proven by the Bitcoin's history and Bitcoin's example. So what we see is that this infrastructure will be so much more efficient, because when Bitcoin ASICs was produced over the course of the last 13 years, the efficiency of each Bitcoin ASIC of the chip increased 300,000 times. So what began with 5 million joules spent on 1 terahash of Bitcoin today is only 15 joules. So 300. Think about this. So with current AI, with current GPUs, only 10% of the actual cost of inference is electricity. The rest is the cost of the GPUs. So that's why indeed it worth like $4.5 trillion. Like, because everyone expects that they are the bottleneck, they are the compute. But future of AI can actually look completely different if the players similar to the ASIC producers for Bitcoin will join this game and will produce the AI chips and connect them to the networks, our networks or any other network, which will play the rules of proof of work, permissionless state, in which even if you have 100 chips, you can connect them to the network and start printing money. Like if you can produce 1,000 chips today, you're nowhere near to NVIDIA, and none of the big players will work with you. Like you need to produce, be able and capable of producing millions of them, even if they are 10 times better. It doesn't matter, because 10 times better with 100 chips, it's like 1,000 chips when everyone is buying millions of them. So the belief which we have is that in the future, the compute itself is going to be so much cheaper because of such networks that it will cover the current subsidy of the network. We basically will build the decentralized, like together, peer-to-peer, in a permissionless manner, we will build a decentralized compute, and therefore we can foresee that the current investment will be covered with the future cost of the coins. So like pay as you go, but in a hybrid way.
That's very well said. Like the decentralization can lower the cost of like AI training and also the infrastructure, as well as like achieve what has been validated in decentralized financial, like Bitcoin, into like AI. So yeah, what about Lane? What's your take on that?
It's a very hard answer to follow. You said pretty much everything I was going to say. I agree with almost everything you said, and I can tell you've given the kind of economics piece here a lot of thought, and that's really appreciated. I think Near is coming from a slightly different perspective here because Near, the blockchain, has been live for 5 years already, and we're proof of stake layer 1. So actually, funnily enough, most people don't know this about Near. Most people know Near as a layer 1 proof of stake blockchain. Actually, Near was founded in 2017 originally as an AI project by 2 early AI pioneers. Who were trying to build something like vibe coding at the time in 2017, 2018, but it was a little bit too early at the time. And so they kind of pivoted to blockchain, and said, oh, we'll take 6 months, we'll build the best blockchain in the world, and 6 months turned into 6 years. And here we are now doing all the AI stuff, back where we started.
Right.
Exactly. So to be completely honest, we have not totally figured out our tokenomics yet, which is why I'm very grateful for the ideas that you're sharing. Like my brain is on fire right now. Again, because the Near coin is like a Solana coin, or I guess you could say Ethereum now, right? Because it's also proof of stake, right? So the question on our minds is kind of like, how do you connect the dots between the Near AI infrastructure products that we're building and the existing blockchain? And that's actually one of the things I was hired to work on. So more soon on that. Generally, I agree with you. I think we're seeing the same thing in the people we speak to, that a lot of our users and our potential users can't afford to access existing AI infrastructure. We work with universities, students, just developers, people like that, who do find this stuff is kind of out of reach, and I think that decentralization has a big role to play here. The one thing I'd push back on is that I actually don't think that, I think you said something like all AI will be decentralized. I actually really strongly don't. If I'm misquoting you, I'm sorry, you can respond. Okay. I think okay, so anyway, in a nutshell, I think 80% of it will remain very highly centralized from the hyperscalers because most people just want efficiency and low cost, and it's hard to compete there, but I do think that there's a big segment of the market, and we're seeing this now talking to companies like financial companies, healthcare companies, law firms, that can't use the existing AI tools because they need things like confidentiality and verifiability, which they can't get. And I think there's a big role for decentralized AI there. We're working with Fala, if anyone's familiar with the Fala network. They're a decentralized network of GPU providers, and they're a close partner of ours, and they have amazing infrastructure. So that's what we're doing right now.
What about you, Kuleen?
Yeah, actually, we can make it a little spicy. I probably disagree with a bunch of stuff that's been said. So one is actually like, so Bitcoin actually was remarkable in that you basically you sort of made up this internet money, and then you gave it to people, and it turns out like they actually spent real dollars to go build real infrastructure. And then it's interesting, I actually did not have heard the 26 gigawatt thing, though a lot of Bitcoin miners now are like pivoting into AI stuff because they have the land and then they have the energy, which was like sort of the big thing with the ASICs that are useless. But the one difference though, and like the reason I think I'm not so optimistic that like decentralized networks actually push the boundary on hardware is that there was no one else focused on building ASICs and like optimizing hash compute when Bitcoin existed. There's no economic incentive to do it. Now there's like the largest economic incentive on the planet to go do this stuff, and so like they're very smart people. And I think it's a little difficult to imagine that like crypto will make meaningful contributions, but we'll see. I think, will GPU infrastructure be highly decentralized or not? Actually, Lane, I think your answer like roughly makes sense, which is like most of it will be very centralized. It's very difficult to compete with scale. Now the question is like, what actually drives the decentralized demand? The lawyers and healthcare, like hospitals and financial services that don't, they care a lot about verifiability and maybe in running their own machines. It's not obvious to me that actually decentralized networks serve that need. You can have centralized providers who will just install the model and you can host it locally, and like that's actually better than distributed networks where like you don't know who you're sending inference requests to. So I actually don't think that necessarily makes sense. My theories on like what could happen are like a little bit more antagonistic. So if we're gonna we probably will live in a world in the next 5 years where like there will be there's like a US model, or there's a China model, or there's like a UAE model. Like governments will, I think, get the pressure to like have their citizenry use models that are aligned with the state. And people will want to opt out of that. And who will provide the compute for people who want to opt out? It's going to be a little bit of, regulatory arbitrage. Like some set of people who are willing to operate hardware that is like technically legal. Like that to me is like one obvious demand vector. And arguably a huge amount of product market in crypto has just been reg arb, like doing something that is like technically not legal, but in a way that like you get away with it. So, that's been the history. I'm like, all right, with decentralized GPUs, maybe that's also the product market fit. We'll see. I don't hold any of these beliefs that strongly, but like that's kind of where I land.
Love that. I think it's a very well-found answer to the first questions, and and also like how this lowering the cost have been accelerating the current days of decentralized AI model training. And me personally, from our past experience, I would also love to share that we also see 40x speed acceleration in our own company's proprietary model training. So I think the whole decentralized AI concept, we're seeing this kind of progressing right now with all the best talents in AI and all the traditional VCs joining the game. So that leads to our second questions. Attracting and retaining massive decentralized compute power is a challenge. So what are the most effective tokenomics incentive and scheduling mechanism needed to ensure high uptime and competitive pricing for distributed GPU networks? Let's start with you, Kuleen.
Yeah, sure. I actually reject the premise of the question. I don't think that the problem is at all getting GPUs. My guess is the way one ought to do this is you sort of find some captive segment of GPUs that's relatively small, find some niche audience to go sell into, start making money, and then when you want to scale up the business, then launch some kind of points program or tokens or whatever. But don't do it the other way around. I think the build it and they will come, or incentivize and they will come models is just not work. I actually think the distributed GPU network idea is actually good. I just think that it's not clear to me that any existing ones make that much sense. And the tokenomics part is very confusing, or not confusing, but I don't think we know the answer. My suspicion though is that if you look at in the last 12 months, tokens have basically only gone up for two reasons. One is the token has a religion behind it, like Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum. And then two is the token makes a lot of money. You're Hyperliquid, you just put 98% of the fees back in the token. And so basically if you're a distributed compute network or something, you have to do one of those things. I don't think you can realistically become a religion, so you have to make a lot of money and put the money back in the token.
I think I agree with your contrarian takes. I mean, I think trying to bootstrap the supply side before we have the demand is probably putting the cart before the horse. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but it hasn't really been demonstrated that we have so much demand for a lot of these kind of decentralized AI products. I think what I've seen work, just to try to offer a constructive answer here, is Akash is a good example. I'm sure many folks here are familiar with them. They are decentralized, they are P2P. Also, by the way, my understanding is about a year old, so I apologize if anything's changed in the past year. But actually what's worked for them is not so much going kind of door to door and trying to sign up people with a GPU in their basement or something. What they actually do in practice is they go to big data centers. And one of the reasons is because, so again, like you said, tokenomics are very complicated and they tend not to appeal to those of us who aren't part of this religion, right? So they go to big data centers with spare capacity and they themselves are a foundation, or I don't know who is the counterparty here. They sign contracts and they say, look, we'll pay you X dollars for this amount of compute, this amount of GPU cycles for a year, and then they pump that into their network and offer that. And I guess maybe there's some margin that they're able to earn there. So that's one model that again, it's not me personally, but that I have seen work and it seems to be fairly sustainable.
Cool, where to start? There was a lot of statements, which I'm actually happy that I can
give you guys here, because you are actually an expert in the industry, some additional perspective. I probably sort of already answered the question with my first monologue, but what I can still add that just too many things that I wanted to say. I would say that starting with economics.
Start anywhere.
It is similar to what Lane was saying in terms of like counters of big data centers. That's what I do right now. Like this year alone, it was like to already 23 countries. Like meeting with the data centers, meeting with people who actually build infrastructure, with thousands and tens of thousands of GPUs provided to the enterprises in a regular market way. You pay the dollars, we give you the compute. What I do is actually I go and find if they have a spare, like unutilized GPUs, and I offer them to connect a little bit, a tiny bit of this to try it out. This is more or less understandable. What I do then, I hook them up with the investors. Because at Gonka, we never raised any money. We specifically focused on this idea because we wanted our tokens to not be perceived as a security in the United States. Because if we want this network to be used by normal companies and even enterprises and corporations in the future, like I'm actually talking about not 5, 10, even more than 20%, but potentially 80% of all the compute in the world to be decentralized. And why I can see this might happen is that today 75% of all these data centers run on Linux. And Linux is open source and free. And Linux always was like that. Like back in 2001, it was already over 10 years of data centers with servers running the internet of the world, and there was no Linux. Linux was less than 1% of the market share by 2001. And today, 25 years later, Linux is a majority of the market. And it's vice versa. There is a niche of solely enterprise to enterprise market, like 25% of this niche, which is served by the closed models of the closed operating systems. And the rest is run by the open source. And the entire internet was all and every and each protocol of what everyone uses in the internet is open source. So I can see that if we will have, like if such networks and if the AI in such networks will have the end-to-end encryptions, and it will, like this will be solved. And I know for sure that even Near Foundation.
Sorry, we have it today.
Yes, like Near Foundation is already providing some of their ideas on how it can be built. And I know multiple other groups developing this, including us. Like foreseeing that in a few months from now, like we will have the option to do the end-to-end encrypted transactions. So the tokenomics here that we apply, in a sense, when investors come to us and say, we want to buy the coins, how do we finance this network, and what do we do? We say, you don't mine. You be the first miners in the network. And right now, we already grew from 80 GPUs in the beginning. Like, we started at months ago with 80 GPUs, which was provided by the miners, mainly, like known miners. And now it's 450 GPUs already in a month. Like, I expect this network to grow to double every month with the number of GPUs. Before somewhere a year from now, the ASICs will hit the market.
Yeah, so in summary, it's like giving this incubation instead of token incentive to encourage the network.
Yes. Sort of like giving a stake in the future of this infrastructure to those who actually build infrastructure, or to those who even rent part of this infrastructure in the beginning, and then buy when it comes to understanding that this is sustainable. So literally today, it's anyone here with $50 in a pocket will be able to run a GPU and a platforms like Nebius, Together AI, or others, like Fast AI even, for one day, and lease this GPU to the network for this one day and get the coins, like get part of their daily reward. And in this sense, that's why we applied the tokenomics of Bitcoin to basically say like whoever mines earliest, like the first 4 years, half of the mined coins will be issued every day, like slowly every day, but the majority of the coins will be issued in the first 4 years, similar to Bitcoin. And that's the first 4 years in which the network would need to prove its liability. Like it is going to survive and live. And there will be ASIC producers like these first 4 years. Therefore, we basically say like majority of the coins will be earned by those who started early. And later on, there will be multiple stages of the development essentially. We will see how we will go. Like currently, those are VCs who is probably like close to half of the GPUs inside of our network. VCs renting GPUs for half a year to a year long, and then basically mining the coins in the beginning.
So yeah, what is Stefan's opinion on that?
Okay, I think start from the tokenomics is very unique in the Web3. So in Web2, you don't see the tokenomics. So in a decentralized way, if I'm the designer of the tokenomics, I would say we would consistently reward the users with, especially the stable providers of the GPU power. They can't go on and off sometimes, and if they don't want it, they are offline. So this kind of people, I think we should design the rewards to be dynamic. For example, for this kind of people, we should minus that. But if for the long and the stable time provider, and especially the long-term one, I think we should design the protocol to make it get more at different levels and high level to get the rewards of the token. But by the way, I also think that tokenomics tokens in the as incentives is not very good in the for the decentralized computing power, because it's also largely related with the market maker, the price. Yeah, if you don't have the good price of the token, you can say this is more like a down, and if your price down and less user providing, and the whole decentralization is collapsed. But if your price is high, like I remember the project called TAO, right? The ticker is TAO. Yeah. The Bitensor, yeah. Their price, when their price are high, many people are going there and providing their computing power. But when their price is down and less people, I think that's a problem of the tokenomic. Yeah. Thank you.
That's very well said. Yeah, so one last question for all of us. Beyond like GPU and computing power, there's also another infrastructure within the AI training and iteration, which will be data. So how can platforms ensure that agents have both cheap and variably high quality data access without compromising the security or privacy of the underlying information? And beyond that, which one do you think is the most critical infrastructure or protocol breakthrough that's needed to allow the decentralized AI to have competitive edge against the traditionally centralized trained AI? That's a big question for you to start.
Let's start from the data receiving. Yeah. I think we from the decentralized, especially from the decentralized data, we can have some kind of tool, maybe some tool to pre-protect it first to say if the providers they are providing the consistent and good quality data. So if the quality is not good, maybe we can minus level or something like that. After that, I think for the verifiable and privacy, we can use the ZK proof, zero knowledge proof, and something called the attestation, because Trustnet has a kind of attestation service. So simply say you can put all the information, all the data into one. So in the blockchain world is SVT. non-transparent wallet, there are inputs stored in that. So the users, they can verify the result yes or no, but not get the deep data inside. That's to protect the privacy. After that, I think we can within that we can put. I think that's the advantage of the decentralized AI because they have this kind of appreciation and they give good service. In the centralized AI, they can't have this. They can't have this privacy because of the privacy policy. Many data they can't reach that. I think that's a disadvantage of the centralized AI.
Right. So your answer to the last question would be the verification and the
Privacy protection.
Yeah, the encryption for the privacy protection. Well, that's pretty great. What about you, Daniil?
I will double down on the privacy and the verification, but in a slightly, probably different manner. As I said, like the end-to-end encryption part will be critical for the decentralized networks. Therefore, absolutely, this will. I believe that this will be honestly the critical part of why decentralized AI will be more used by the regular users, consumers of applications than decentralized, because maybe not, few of you know, but the companies in the United States all obliged to provide all of your private data to the court when requested. And it should not be like a government case, like FBI chasing you, or IRS chasing you. It can be just a corporate quarrel between you and your partners, which will actually lead to some of your personal data to be uncovered in front of the court, and it's going to be public. As it was with Elon Musk, with all of his text messages like publicly available related to the case. That doesn't matter. So with decentralized AI and end-to-end encryption, this will not be the case. I mean, and no one will even be able to tackle this. And even if we think that the governments of today will then try to restrict this, we should all remember what happened 30-ish plus years ago when the encryption was only first introduced for general use in the form of PGP, and then the governments tried to shut it down. They were like, it's a national security threat, and no one had the right to provide the encryption methodology to the public and blah, blah, blah. So we've been there already, and the society actually protected itself against this threat. And I believe we will be there again. And in a sense of like, we all have the right for privacy. It's in the law of free countries. Okay, let's put it that way. But in that sense, it's going to be the end users and consumers who will use this network, and that's where I will come to the point of I feel and I think that the most important part about the decentralized AI is the sense of ownership and an agency in a sense. Like, it is the end user, like all of us sitting here, who's going to be owning this network in the clear sense that in our networks, and I'm sure that in other networks it will be the same. The priority will be set for the open source models. In our particular network, we reserve 20% of the GPU of the network specifically for training open source models. Like, not being hired by someone to train their models, but provide the GPU, provide the compute necessary needed for training the open source models to the community, to the engineers and scientists all over the world to actually create the best open source models, and not just having them as like a concept without billions of dollars invested into actually training them, and without the data needed to train them, but actually being trained with the data provided by the community of users, because they want this to exist, they want this to be private, they want this to be open source, and they want no one to be able to affect the results of the agents of the future in someone else's interest except my interest. And in this sense, like not all of, and each of us will be able to run a computer back at home. Like for maybe it will right now to run a DeepSeek, you need like $200,000 worth of equipment to run DeepSeek at home. In the future, it might be cheaper, but like we're still there, and still far away from majority of the population on the planet to be able to use this. Therefore, the answer to this is like the ownership. As I said, like $50 is enough to rent a GPU for a day. Like this is like I invested $50. Now I'm part of this. Now I will be willing to provide the data, to be the labeler for this future network, to be someone who will benefit from the fact that the future of AI is open source. Similar to how the server infrastructure of the cloud today is open source, even though it's centralized and belongs to like 3 corporations. Like this is the notion of how I see this will all happen. Like because people mostly they own it in any sense. Like whether I actually own some token from this, like that's my tokenomics, or whether I am actually like I am going to be the user of the future cheapest AI. If the ASIC will hit the market, if I understand that there is lots of skepticism about like whether it's possible or not, why it's not going to be NVIDIA to do this? But NVIDIA was there already. NVIDIA was producing racks for Bitcoin mining. It's in a sense it saved their business 10 years ago. They like increased their market, but they lost it, and they lost it to the decentralized nature of producing ASICs in a clear open source format of what was Bitcoin. In this sense, like if the ASICs in the future are going to be thousands of times more efficient than the NVIDIA GPUs right now, it's in all of us. It's in all of our interest for this to be 1,000 times cheaper, and therefore we're all benefiting from this, and therefore we're all investing in this.
I think that's the relation Kuleen was talking about already. The decentralized AI winning over the sovereign governance and the tech monopolies.
Your mic is off.
I think it's out of charge. So, yeah. What about what's your take?
All right. Slightly different perspective, but it is connected to a number of things that you touched upon. So open models is a big part of it, verifiability, incentives. I'm going to try to paint a little bit of a picture here how we think about data and AI and model training at NEAR, and certainly how I'm thinking about it. The first thing I would say is like the business model of the internet, or content specifically, is kind of broken right now, right? So the internet kind of killed newspapers, magazines, right, kind of traditional print. And then, we kind of had things like Google search and other aggregators sort of kill online publications in a sense, right? Like there's a big controversy when Google News first launched because you could access all the kind of content there for free. And now we're in the third generation of this happening with GPTs, where like GPTs are gobbling up everyone's content. If you're a content creator, you're putting content out there, and like now, effectively, that just gets gobbled up by the models, in the training process. And I'm kind of accessing your content, without paying for it. Verifiable model training is a really powerful idea, right? And sorry, it's very complicated, but I'll try to give you this sort of 30-second version, right? The idea is that when you have these secure enclaves, TEE, trusted execution environments, right, that have been added onto GPUs, which is now the case, right, as of the Blackwell series, as of the most recent GPUs that launched second half of last year, and these are the ones that we're running on, right? You can do something really powerful where you can train a model, and then you get a cryptographic proof of what's in the model, of how it was trained, right? And there's a million reasons this is exciting, and to be clear, like when you pay someone, you go to, there's a few companies that do model training, you pay them $10 million, you say, do this, give me a model, they hand you a 100 gigabyte file that's just a bunch of numbers, and they say, trust me, bro. this is what you asked for, right? There's no way to verify that is what it actually is, right? But so with these new techniques, which are still, kind of in a research phase right now, but we are working on them, I'll be able to hand you the model with a cryptographic proof of what went into it, what the parameters are, what it was trained on, et cetera, okay? So now put yourself in the shoes of a content creator. If you can now be a content creator and willingly offer your content to enter a model and have a verifiability proof attached to it, right, that you provided XYZ content, now you can be compensated for it, right? So when people run inference against a model that was trained on your data, you can actually kind of complete the circle here and like have the kind of revenue flow back to the people who contributed to the model. Okay, so this is, to be very clear, this is, as I said, kind of like a vision. We're working towards this. I think most of the kind of technologies are in place, but they're like model verifiable model training is still very slow. But this is our vision for kind of fixing the business model of the internet and decentralizing, how we contribute data. And final thought, centralized AI can't really compete here per se because we'll be able to unlock sources of data, right? Like for example, private, public, like contents of books or magazines or things like this that are not available for centralized AI right now because they don't have that verifiability piece of the revenue.
Yeah, I'll say a couple quick things. Some more, they're just like, I think, interesting topics maybe people will find kind of fun. So one is like on privacy. Like, actually, I've generally been very skeptical of privacy in that like it is one of those things that people say they care about, but actually every single person clicks the terms of service and agree, and you don't read the thing. And I would argue that actually the trade that society has made with respect to sort of technology companies of giving up privacy for products has been good. Like the best example of this is probably Google Maps. Google Maps is like one of the most unbelievably useful, like society-enabling services that is completely free. And why is that the case? Is because Google makes money on ads and you give a bunch of data, and like that's just like a win-win. And the history of technology is like a lot of these trades, and this is just good. And it's unclear to me that this should change. So that's on privacy, where like, I actually do think that at this point LLMs can understand people so deeply that like it's kind of unnerving to think about some of that stuff getting out. So maybe people care more about privacy, but like you have to really question if that will actually happen. Second thing, ownership. Another thing that like people, especially in crypto, seem to care about a lot, but like I don't think it really matters. Like, for example, Spotify wanted to sort of be like increasingly the dominant music app. You don't own shit on Spotify, and like everyone's fine with it, and it's like a great service. I use it. I'm like an absolute power user. Kindle. You don't own any of the books that you buy, and that worries me a little bit as like an avid reader that like Amazon goes bankrupt one day and like my whole collection disappears. But anyways, like by and large, the most successful, most useful things, many of them don't have any shred of ownership, and like seems fine. My sort of meta point or like belief around building decentralized or distributed applications in the AI world, whether it's like distributed GPU networks or like some kind of distributed scale AI type thing where you're collecting data, which I actually think is, both ideas are good, is you've got to find some niche. Like I think if your expectation is that you'll compete on like scale or cost, and this is just like far too competitive of an area that you should expect to be able to compete on those things. And like my general intuition is that anytime you make something distributed, you add overhead. Like there's just more overhead. So you have to ask yourself like, why is the overhead worth it? And so that's the question you have to answer. I don't have the answer, but it probably involves finding some very specific niche, crushing it in that niche, and then going from there.
It's very well said. So yeah, for the last questions, we had like answers for like the data encryption, verification. We had like how open source to decentralized AI training can go beyond like sovereign governments and also the tech monopolies, as well as how the tech monopolies can incentivize the compute infrastructure as well as the data infrastructure, while having this domain-specific niche for each company to actually achieve product market fit. And yeah, so really thankful for every panelist and your insightful sharing. And even though like time is flying, so even though we still have so many unsolved problems in decentralized AI development, but we have to end our panel today for now. Thank you so much. Let's take a picture.
Down here, yeah.